When you think of a luxury watch, what's the first brand that comes to mind? Not Patek Philippe, not Audemars Piguet, not even Omega, the watch that went to the moon. For most people on Earth, the answer is the same: Rolex. But why? Why not another brand? There are hundreds of Swiss watchmakers with longer histories, more complicated movements, and arguably better craftsmanship. The answer has almost nothing to do with the watch itself. It has everything to do with one of the greatest marketing strategies in the history of luxury. This is the story of how Rolex didn't just build a watch. They built a symbol. London, England. A 24-year-old German immigrant named Hans Wilsdorf registers a small watch company with his brother-in-law. The name? Not Rolex. Not yet. Wilsdorf and Davis. Hans has one obsession: making wristwatches accurate enough to be taken seriously. Because in 1905, wristwatches were considered a joke. Real men wore pocket watches. Wristwatches were fragile, inaccurate, and seen as jewelry for women. No serious person would trust their time to something strapped to a wrist. Hans Wilsdorf was about to change that forever. He moves production to Switzerland, where the finest watchmakers in the world are concentrated, and starts obsessing over one thing: precision. In 1910, a Wilsdorf watch becomes the first wristwatch in history to receive an official chronometer certification from the Swiss Official Chronometer Testing Institute. For the first time, a wristwatch was as accurate as a pocket watch. The skeptics had no argument left. And in 1908, Hans registers a new name. He wants something short, something that works in every language, something easy to remember: Rolex. But Hans Wilsdorf understood something that most watchmakers didn't. A great product means nothing if nobody knows about it. So instead of taking out newspaper ads, he put his watches on people doing impossible things. 1927. A young English woman named Mercedes Gleitze attempts to swim the English Channel. 35 miles of freezing cold, open water. Hans Wilsdorf straps a Rolex Oyster around her neck. She swims for over 10 hours. The watch survives, perfectly accurate. Not a drop of water inside. The next day, Hans takes out a full-page advertisement in the Daily Mail. Not to talk about gears or movements, just one message: a Rolex survived the English Channel. Sales explode overnight. The world's first waterproof watch, the Oyster, was born not in a laboratory. It was born in the English Channel. Then came Everest. 1953. Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay are preparing to attempt what no human has ever done: reach the summit of Mount Everest. On their wrists, Rolex Explorer watches. When they reach the top, 29,032 feet above sea level, the Rolex is still running. Hans Wilsdorf doesn't wait. The news hits the front pages on the same day as Queen Elizabeth's coronation. Rolex is on every front page in the world. Two stunts, two moments that defined a brand forever. But Hans Wilsdorf's greatest invention wasn't the Oyster. It wasn't the Datejust or the Submariner. It was understanding which world Rolex needed to live in. Not the world of watchmaking, the world of elite sport. Formula One is the most watched annual sporting series on Earth. Over 1.5 billion people tune in across a season. Rolex became the official timepiece of Formula One in 2013. Every lap time, every pit stop, every podium ceremony, Rolex. But it goes deeper than logos on barriers. Formula One is watched by the wealthiest audience in sport. Rolex isn't advertising to everyone. They're advertising to exactly the right person. Since 1978, Rolex has been the official timekeeper of Wimbledon, the oldest tennis tournament in the world. White clothes, strawberries and cream, the most elegant sporting event on the calendar. The famous Rolex clock on center court has been there for decades. Players glance at it between games. Millions of cameras capture it every year. Golf and Rolex were made for each other. The Masters at Augusta National, the most exclusive golf tournament in the world, has been partnered with Rolex since 1980. Golf is a sport of patience, precision, and tradition. Exactly the values Rolex has spent 120 years building. Tiger Woods wore Rolex. Jack Nicklaus wore Rolex. Phil Mickelson wore Rolex. When the greatest golfers in history strap on a watch, it's Rolex. Horse racing, the sport of kings, Royal Ascot in England, the Kentucky Derby in America, the most aristocratic events in the sporting calendar. Rolex is there too, because horse racing isn't just a sport, it's a social event for the elite. Old money, new money, everyone dressed in their finest, and on their wrists, Rolex. Step back and look at the full picture. Formula One, tennis, golf, horse racing, sailing, skiing. Rolex didn't choose these sports randomly. Every single one shares three things. They are expensive to participate in, they attract wealthy audiences, and they have a culture of tradition and excellence. Rolex didn't buy advertising. They bought belonging. But elite sport was only half the strategy. The other half was cinema. From 1962 to 1995, across 16 James Bond films, 007 wore a Rolex. Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton. James Bond wasn't just a character. He was the aspirational man of the 20th century. Sophisticated, dangerous, impeccably dressed. And on his wrist, a Rolex Submariner. Millions of men around the world didn't just want to be James Bond. They wanted his watch. When Omega took over from Rolex as Bond's watch in 1995, Rolex had already won. 33 years of the most aspirational character in cinema wearing your watch. That association never fully leaves. Here's something most people don't know. You cannot simply walk into a Rolex boutique and buy a Submariner or a Daytona. They are almost always out of stock. Waiting lists stretch months, sometimes years. Is this an accident? Absolutely not. Rolex deliberately produces fewer watches than the market demands, around 800,000 to 1 million watches per year. That sounds like a lot until you realize the entire world wants one. The result? A Rolex Daytona that retails for $15,000 sells on the secondary market for $30,000 to $50,000. When a product becomes harder to get, it becomes more desirable. When it becomes more desirable, it becomes a status symbol. When it becomes a status symbol, everyone wants it even more. Rolex understood this cycle before anyone else in luxury. So why does everyone think of Rolex first? Not because it's the most complicated watch, not because it's the most expensive, not even because it's the most accurate. Because for over 100 years, Rolex made one decision after another to be present at every moment of human achievement and aspiration. The English Channel, the summit of Everest, Formula One, Wimbledon, the Masters, James Bond, the Oval Office, the boardroom. Rolex isn't just a watch, it's a shortcut. One glance at someone's wrist, and the world draws a conclusion about who they are. No other brand in watchmaking history has ever achieved that. And that, more than any movement, any complication, any certification, is why Rolex is Rolex. If this video made you think differently about what a brand actually is, subscribe. Because next week we're asking a dangerous question. Is Rolex actually worth the money? Or are you just paying for the logo? You might not like the answer,